Today on the ZuluOne podcast, we have a great guest. She's an educator, an artist, a singer, a mother of three, and a family constellations expert, a woman of many talents, and most of all, my partner in crime for the past 36 years, my sister, Alicia, Acosta, Henriquez.
So you must have gotten a very important text message during our meditation.
No, I was looking for something in Google.
Oh, during the meditation?
During the meditation.
So being
It came
present
to me.
during the meditation that you said, oh, I forgot, I need to buy something
No,
on Amazon.
no, I was looking for something on Google.
What were you looking for?
Characters of Encanto, so I would get the names correct, and I wouldn't mix some characters.
So today we're going to be talking about the Disney movie Encanto
Yes.
with my sister,
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, Acosta, Henriquez.
Yes.
Which we believe in some capacity has been a podcast that has been profoundly about family constellation therapy.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, given the movie Encanto, which is the movie Disney just released in 2022 or 2021?
2021.
In November of 2021. We're outside, so it sounds a little, you can hear cars going on. But Disney released it, I think, in November of 2021, and it's a movie about...
No, it wasn't November. It was December 24th
Oh, 2021?
of 2021.
Okay. Anyways,
Make sure.
so late 2021, they released this movie, and it's a movie, first Hispanic movie.
On November 24th, you were right.
See,
Yeah,
November 21st.
you were
It's
right.
okay. I'm kind of always right.
That is true.
So November of 2021, and talk about. So tell me a little bit about the Encanto story from your perspective. What is it? Tell me the premise of the story.
So it's about a girl, and she's the main character. Her name is Maribel, and they live in this beautiful, magical area in Colombia. It's full of mountains and nature, and there's this town surrounding them. And they basically, where their house is, it's the origin of this town. Vale? So
Okay.
many people followed this Maribel's family. The Familia Madrigal followed them into this magical area.
Okay, so I'm gonna give everybody spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Encanto,
Yes.
go watch it and then come listen to the podcast.
Exactly. So just,
Because
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about
yes.
spoilers
Yes.
100%.
Yes. So in the Family Madrigal, everybody has a special gift. And the main character, Maribel, doesn't. So when she turns
So-
a certain age,
What would be examples of their special gifts?
so one of the cousins has like sonic hearing, so she can hear even a pin drop.
Okay.
Maribel's sister, she's super strong.
Okay.
Lisa. And then we have Isabela, who's beautiful, and she makes everything beautiful. So she makes these amazing flowers come to life, and she's perfect. The mother, Maribel's mother, can heal people through her food.
Okay.
And like she makes her, arepas with queso, which is Colombian as well as Venezuelan. The origin of arepas is questionable.
Well, but that's relevant because we are both Venezuelan Americans.
Yes, exactly.
Our mother is American and
our
our father is Venezuelan, so that's very relevant to our culture.
And we had arepas for breakfast this morning.
Yes, and we had arepas for breakfast this morning. So.
And the grandmother, who is, I would say, the founder of the family.
The matriarch?
The matriarch of the family. She doesn't have a gift. And her sole purpose is to protect every single person in the family and protect the gift. And
The miracle.
The miracle, exactly. And she has a gauge of how the miracles are or how the gifts are through this candle. So if the candle stays lit, everything's good. If the candle starts
Okay.
to go, starts
To dim.
to dim, then, they're in trouble.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't remember the age where they have like a ceremony and the candle gives them their gift. I think she has to be 9 or 13. I don't remember the age.
But it's young. It's very young.
It's
like
very young.
Antonio, the little boy, is like maybe 6 or 8 years old when he
when he gets his gift.
When he gets his gift.
Yes, and his gift is
speaking to animals.
Yes, and his room is amazing. So that he touches the knob of the door, and then he gets the gift, and then he opens the door, and it has to do with the gift he has.
Like his world opens.
His world opens.
His
yes.
world opens.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was her turn, her ceremony, and when she grabbed the knob of the door, nothing happened.
Okay.
So the grandmother's like, "Oh, Maribel's cursed. Our family is cursed."
So the miracle's not working anymore.
The miracle's not working anymore. Exactly.
Okay.
So that's the base of the story. So
Okay.
so this movie shows us how everything starts to unfold, and we start learning about more characters. We learn about her uncle Bruno, who sees the future and how he's being rejected, and then we meet the aunt, who has her gift is controlling the weather.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that she always has to be in a good mood. So thunder and a storm and rain and hail don't come and ruin it for everybody else. So she always is like, happy thoughts, so that everything can clear.
Okay.
Clear
So,
off.
from a constellation perspective,
Yes.
what would you say the significance of Encanto is? Would you say so? We'll give a little bit of a brief overview of the movie, right? Is like Bruno is the excluded one, right? So nobody talks about Bruno.
Yeah, and we hear in the movie, like, apparently the song,
Yeah.
it has surpassed the Frozen song.
Yeah, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda writes the song,
amazing.
all the
He's so
songs for
talented.
the movie. Very good. I mean, incredible.
He wrote half of the songs. for
Half of the
Encanto.
song. Okay, so he wrote half of the songs, right? Because Carlos Vives writes a couple. One of the songs.
No, Lin-Manuel wrote the Carlos
Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the Carlos Vives song.
Mhm.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so a man of many talents. So, given the fact that there's music in this and there's large constellation themes, right? Is like as we come, our background is in family constellation therapy. So how did you come into the world of family constellation therapy? Okay, our father's just left the house and he's getting in the car. Apparently, this subject
conversation
might
is
be
a
a
little
little
bit-
too deep,
Yeah, too close to home.
too close to home. So,
So I
how did you get into constellations?
was living in Romania, in Bucharest, Romania at the time.
Okay, first, sorry, I didn't mean to ask you that question.
Oh.
What is a constellation?
So what
Let's
is a
ask that
constellation?
first, and then
That's
I'll
a
ask
great
you
question.
how did you get into constellations?
A family constellation is when you are aware, right, or you come to terms with a pattern, right, that happened in your family. Okay, so it's a result of that pattern is a result of an event that happened, a traumatic event, and a traumatic event can be something as simple as a situation that you were not able to process emotionally.
All right.
And because you weren't able to heal.
So I think Dad wants to join us in the podcast.
Okay, he's going to join us.
Oh,
This
wow.
is great.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
we have an audience.
And we have an audience of one, my father, our father.
So because they weren't able to process that trauma, it passes on from generation to generation unconsciously.
So you would say that a family constellation addresses unresolved trauma
Yes.
and patterns that repeat themselves in family systems,
Exactly.
right? So let's say there is a father or a grandfather that was murdered, and this will be irrelevant, right? That trauma is passed down from
Generation
to generation, and different people in the family take on things
Yep.
to maintain that system.
Exactly.
So now that we've explained what a family constellation is, how did you come into family constellations?
So I was introduced to it by my mother,
Okay.
who went through a traumatic experience. Her boyfriend died in a car accident in Africa. He was visiting his daughter who was on a mission trip.
Okay.
And she was seeing a psychologist in Romania, and he recommended Family Constellation. So the following year, I decided to join her, and it was a 10-day retreat with 50 psychologists that were getting trained to become facilitators of Family Constellation.
So what was your first impression when our mother told you about a family constellation? Did she just came up to you and said,
Yeah, I did this amazing work.
I did this amazing work.
And I'm
What
like,
was that
you're
about?
in a cult. Like, she explained it to me, and it was so hard to understand that when I went with her initially, I was just there to, like, hang out in the hotel and, like, go hiking and
So you got
going
a free trip out of it, right?
Yes, a free trip. And then I learned that there was a lot of bears in the area.
Okay.
So I really couldn't go by myself and explore the mountains of Transylvania. So it was her turn to do a constellation, and she asked the facilitator, and he suggested that I should go and sit and see what it was all about. And
So you were not doing the constellation.
no,
You were just
the
like,
first day I didn't do it.
you were like hanging out in the hotel, like,
Yeah.
I got a good time.
And
I didn't know this part of the
I
story.
was so bored.
And you were like, oh, this is super boring.
I was the whole
I'm
day
going
in the room.
to see what the
yes,
cult is about.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I experienced her constellation. And what was really cool is that she had to get a representative.
Wait. So you get to the place,
I get to the place.
and what does it look like? Like,
so it's
what's...
this big room,
Okay.
and there's 50 people sitting in a huge circle. And I have no idea who these people are. And
Okay,
then-
so they're sitting like on the floor, on a chair?
No, they're sitting in chairs in a
Okay.
huge circle. And then you have the facilitator, which was Alberto Iturbe,
Okay.
who is an amazing family constellation facilitator, with his two sons were there.
Okay.
And then a woman who was translating
from
Spanish to Romanian.
because he's from Spain,
He's from Spain. He's from
Okay.
San Sebastián,
which is northern Spain.
northern Spain, the Basque country, and he speaks Basco, which is the official language in Spain.
And Spanish.
And Spanish, yes. So when the facilitator asked her to pick somebody to represent you, my
Me.
brother John,
Me.
and then me,
Okay.
I was like, okay, well,
So this is Mom's constellation.
Mom's constellation.
And they ask somebody to represent me and you.
Yes.
So people that don't know anybody,
Yes.
right? So these are people in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
So what you're supposed to do is look around the room, and the facilitator will tell you different people that you need to ask to represent the certain people in your family.
Okay.
So Alberto asked my mom, okay, pick somebody to represent you. So, Mom got up, she looked around the room, and whoever just calls your attention, that's who you have to ask. So
Okay.
she went over to the person and she said, Benita, can you please represent my mother? Can you please represent me? And the person says yes, and then you grab them by the shoulder and you say, you're going to represent me, Cindy. And then you put them in the room. So she did the same thing for our dad, and then she did the same thing for you, and then she did the same thing for me. So she picked 4 people to represent our
Family of
family
origin.
of origin. So I was sitting there and I was like, okay, whatever. Like this, she picked a girl who was representing me. So I'm like, okay, let's see, what she's doing.
What were your thoughts? Were you like, this is weird?
Yeah, I was
Or-
super open to it. I'm like, okay, let's see what this is about.
So you were so bored that you were open to anything.
Yes.
Okay. You're like, I'm so bored. I'd rather be doing anything, literally anything,
Yeah.
than doing what I was doing. Okay.
Yeah, I was just stuck in the room watching Romanian TV because I couldn't go outside because of ursus. That's the word
Because
for bear
bears-
in Romania.
Uh-huh.
So I start seeing the dynamic between the 2 people that were representing you and me. So the girl was standing
Okay.
next to your representative.
So this is a person that doesn't know us from anybody,
no
right?
idea.
Doesn't understand our internal family dynamic.
Yes. No.
Okay.
idea.
And through some sort of magic.
Yes. She starts to get really close to him. And then she starts to tickle him and to bug him. And he's like, stop it. Leave me alone. She starts to untie his shoelaces.
Are you serious?
Yes. And he's like, leave me alone.
Wow.
And then she starts to get on her tippy toes, cracking her feet. And I always do that. So I started to see a dynamic that was very true to the two of us.
So in the constellation world, it's resonating.
Yes.
Is what one would say.
Absolutely. And I was like, oh my
I
gosh.
forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how our
See? It's not me.
What?
Just saying.
What do you mean?
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't.
You're always bothering me.
Yes. I always need your attention, apparently.
Apparently.
So that, and I was able to see her constellation, and it made a lot of sense to me. So then once I saw that, the facilitator...
Wait. So you saw her whole constellation unfold.
And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, this is really cool. And just because I participated and I sat in the circle and I saw it is when I was able to understand it. So I think when you explain it to someone, it's so hard to be able to explain it in a way where they're able to understand.
Okay.
Like, I think the only way they're able to understand 100% is that they're open to it and that they participate in a constellation and they feel it. Like, once you represent someone, you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is so hard to explain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think Encanto does...
Like love.
Yes.
Like, you can't explain love to somebody, right?
Exactly.
You just have to feel it.
Exactly.
And everybody kind of feels it because they, in most cases, they
Yeah.
feel it from either parent or a dog or
Yep.
they feel it from somebody.
Yes. So I think Encanto does a really, really...
Whoa, we're not there yet.
Wait, but that's why we're connecting Encanto to constellations.
Okay.
So I think if you want to explain constellations to someone, the first thing I would do right now is watch Encanto and tell me what you think it's about.
Okay.
And then you can be like, constellations is about that. So they have a better understanding of what constellations is, and they're not that scared to try it out. Yeah. Because I feel like today, everybody's starting to wake up and start to heal together. Like, I think there's more and more communities of people doing ayahuasca, people doing other things to heal. Like, when would you think 15 years ago that Disney was going to do a movie like Encanto? Like, if you look at Frozen, it's also about constellation.
Wait, 15 years ago that you did this first constellation.
Exactly.
How old were you?
I was 18.
18.
And then from then...
You were a little kid.
Yeah. And I didn't know, like, I was super insecure. Like, I had a lot going on. Like, our past was difficult,
Yeah.
And I think it came at the right time. And because of that, participating in Mom's first constellation, it opened me up to keep working on myself.
So did you... I'm sorry to go back to the constellation, but did you represent anybody in that first constellation?
Oh, in that first, 10-day
training?
It
was a 10-day training, but you did...
Yeah, I represented a lot of people.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
And how did that work? So you're sitting, minding your own business. Mom's constellation's over.
Yeah.
Emotions all over the place and very emotional. Were you moved emotionally by Mom's constellation?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're moved emotionally by constellation. And so you're the next day, you're sitting around and then how does that process happen? So you're sitting in the circle
and
the 50
because
people.
This is a workshop, a training, every single person does a constellation.
Okay.
So that we went through 50 constellations in these 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, Alberto was also teaching because people were getting certified. So I always wanted to get picked. I was always like, pick me. And I would look at people to make eye contact because I wanted to keep feeling, because it was so cool.
Okay, so tell me the first time that you got picked. What was it like?
I was like a gauge. It was in Romania let me just back up a little bit and talk about Romania. So Romania went through a horrible dictatorship with Ceausescu.
Yep.
And they went through a lot of trauma. There was a ton of illegal abortions.
Yeah.
There was they could only take showers on Saturdays for 2 hours.
Yeah.
A lot of people were hungry and cold. They went through a lot. So these workshops and these constellations were very, very powerful.
They were deep.
And
heavy.
Very, very heavy. So there was one constellation, I can't even remember what it was about, but I was a gauge. Alberto picked me to represent.
So you're sitting there.
I'm sitting there.
You've never represented before.
Never represented before.
And Alberto comes up to you.
And grabs me.
And grabs you and said, you're going to represent.
You're going to represent if this constellation should keep going or not. Like how heavy or how much emotion you had. Like if you get to get super, super hot and uncomfortable, let me know.
So you're as a thermometer.
Yes, exactly.
Of what's happening in the constellations. Like, should the constellation continue?
Yes.
Or is it going to be too much?
Yes.
Just to feel.
Yes. And it was like, oh my gosh. The constellation kept going because
Okay.
I wasn't going to, like, I didn't feel like my head was going to explode.
Okay.
But I did feel a lot during the constellation. So that was my first experience facilitating for someone.
No, you were representing.
Sorry. Representing for someone. The second time.
Just to be clear, because Alberto in the constellation is the facilitator.
Yes.
And the people that are
Yes.
picked to participate in the constellations are representatives.
So I see it as a tool. So I am a tool to help this person heal.
Correct.
So I try to go with an open mind and just open to whatever I'm supposed to receive so I can tell the person when the facilitator asks me. So when you do a constellation, you have to wait for the facilitator to be like, okay, you're representing her mother. How do you feel? So he is like orchestrating everything.
Okay. And when he asks you, how are you feeling? Are you like, how do you think you feel, or is it like what your opinion of it is?
No, not your. No,
or
no,
is
no.
it
you
like
can't start
what is
to,
it something else?
To analyze what it is.
Okay.
So it's just a feeling. You can say, "Oh, my feet feel heavy. I want to move this way. I want to move that way." Like you can't analyze anything because it's not for you to analyze.
Okay, so you have to be like a clear vessel.
You have to be a clear vessel to
and
the
if you feel like laying on the
ground
ground
or crying,
or without
happy,
opinion,
yes,
you
just do it.
You're just there
Yes.
in a role
Yes.
of representing whatever the constellation requires at that time.
And a lot of times they pick you because you also need to heal whatever the other person's working on.
Okay.
So an example of that is I was picked to represent a girl who her parents got a divorce and her dog saved her.
Well, that makes sense.
So
Why does that make sense?
and he's laughing because he knows exactly.
Why does that make sense?
So when my parents got a divorce, or always, we had this dog. She was a Lhasa Apso, and her name was Sasha, and we call her our hairy sister. Like, I never was able to talk about my feelings. So I would always say how Sasha felt, and however Sasha felt is how I really felt.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Sasha.
It's still hard for you to talk about her?
No, not at all. So Sasha died when she was 17, which is remarkable, and it's because I loved her so much. She died in Romania.
You willed her to a long life. Okay.
Yes. She lived in 4 different countries, which is
Yes, she
remarkable. But I represented this girl and her dog. Like, her constellation was thanking her dog so much for helping her deal with or heal just accept that her parents were getting divorced. So at the end of the constellation, I said to Alberto, a facilitator, and I said, it's really interesting that she picked me because my dog also helped me heal or go through my parents' divorce.
Okay.
Like, she was that, like...
Your support structure.
My support, and yeah. She gave me love unconditionally. She was always by my side. So it was, that girl picked me for a reason. Because I also needed to heal that. So, yeah, it was remarkable.
Okay. All right. So you get represented, right? So you represent somebody in the family system.
Yes.
And then, so now you haven't done your own constellation.
And I did. I did do a constellation
on
that year.
That trip,
year I did a
you got
constellation.
picked on doing a constellation.
Yeah, so after I saw moms, they invited me to join the group to continue the 9-day workshop. So I did.
Okay, so you do so they call your name.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that constellation, or can you not talk about that
No, I
constellation?
can. I worked on my relationship with my dad, with our dad.
Okay, so what was that like? So he pulls out your name or something.
Yes.
Right, and he says...
what do you want to work on?
Alicia.
So I said,
It says Alicia.
yes. So I sit down right next to him, and he's
Okay.
like, what do you want to work on? And then I was...
Wait, was this the one that...
Yeah.
Okay, so...
So I sit, like, I'm, like, looking at him, and I'm like, I think he's going to save me.
Okay.
And he says in front of the whole group, she wants me to save her, and I'm not.
Very matter-of-factual.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
She wants me to save her.
Yeah. I wanted anybody to save me. I was like, please.
Anybody. Just anybody save me.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was a
so...
rough time. So, he asked me to get somebody to represent myself and somebody to represent Dad, and I worked on my relationship with my father.
So it's just you
Yep,
and Dad,
that's it.
and that's just the two of you.
Yep.
So when you picked the person to represent to represent Dad, what did you? So you're walking around the room. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I walk around the room, and then it's whoever called my attention, and I grabbed that gentleman, and I said, do you want to represent my father? And he said yes. And then, what was cool about the Constellation is that Alberto told the person that was representing me to sit down, and he put me in front of the person representing my dad. So I was able to talk to the representative directly.
Okay, so you at some point in this dynamic, he says, okay, so Alicia, would you like to stand in the place of your
Yes.
representative?
Yeah.
So you get up from the
Yes.
chair
And
and stand,
Yep.
and you're talking to this person that you don't know
yes.
that is representing your father.
Yep.
And then what happens from there?
We had a conversation. Like, I had to say certain things to him that Alberto was telling me to say to heal our relationship.
Do you want to go into that or no?
I don't remember what I said.
But was it?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah, I don't judge you. It was more of like, I honor you, I respect you. You're my father, you're big, I'm small, like that kind of
Was there a dynamic where you were doing something like
Yeah.
not in the position where you're supposed to be,
Yeah.
or as equals, or what was
No,
the...
I was his mother.
You were in this position of Dad's mom.
Yes.
So my mama, which is our grandmother.
Yes.
And what's incorrect about that dynamic, or where does that dynamic come from? Like, what is the need for it, and why is it inappropriate?
So unconsciously, that's the dynamic that we created. And you can see it in so many relationships. Like, now that I'm aware of it, I can see it in so many people. And I want to be like, you're being your father's father, or you're being your mother's mother.
So that's called parentification.
Parentification.
It's when a child becomes a parent's parent.
And you do it unconsciously. It's not like you wake up and be like, my father is not
Now,
behaving the way
today,
he's supposed to.
so today I'm going to be
Yeah,
his
exactly.
mother.
Yes.
So where do you think that comes from?
Like a generational trauma. It's a pattern that we've created.
Okay.
So I had to put myself back as the child and not the parent.
So would you say that comes from a place of, like, you have to assume responsibility, or does it come from a place of love?
Out of love and loyalty. So I'm so loyal to him because
So you're so loyal to the family system and to your father.
that I assume that position. That does not belong to me.
You say, even though
Yes.
I'm your child, I'm going to take this burden.
I love you so much.
I love you so much.
Unconditionally, that I'm going to take this burden from you.
That doesn't belong to you.
That does not belong to you. Because I love you so much.
That's big.
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility
It's a
for an
big-
18-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big, big, big responsibility for an 18-year-old.
So the beauty of family
No,
constellations.
no, we're not there yet. Come on, let's
Sorry.
go back.
Sorry.
So now that you do the parentification, right, and you go back to your position, what was that dynamic like? So you had to, what did you have to do? Like, how did you feel afterwards? Like, you did a movement, right?
Yes.
Which is going back in theory. Crap. Sorry, I dropped something. So going back to, giving back you went back to your position as the child.
As a child.
And how did you feel afterwards? Immediately after, what was the movement
Well,
feeling like?
it was very emotional.
So you're bawling.
Yeah, it was crying, and I think it takes a couple days for you, and you can't think about it. So after you do the constellation, you can't talk about it, you can't think about it. You just have to let it be. And I just felt a couple days later that like this weight was lifted off my shoulders, because I felt very, very heavy. Like I had this burden that I was carrying that didn't belong to me.
Because you were in a position that didn't belong to you in the family system.
Exactly.
That like your natural position as the child of your father or both of your parents.
Exactly.
You're in the position of the mother.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's how I got introduced to constellations.
So that's your introduction to constellation.
And I have never stopped since.
And this was in 2006?
Yeah.
2006?
2006, yep.
Yeah, 2006.
So, and I organize constellations in Chicago.
Okay, so we'll get there.
Yeah, but like, look at the result.
Yeah,
like,
no,
I
that's-
believe
it's
so much
beautiful,
in the
yeah.
system
Yeah.
that you followed the workshop the following year. You did a
I
constellation.
did a
with
constellation the
it. So
following
tell me
year.
a little bit about when you heard about.
So now I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about when we told you about family constellations and what we did.
So this is a funny story. So we were sitting in the kitchen.
In Romania.
No.
Where?
We were sitting in the kitchen, I think in somebody's house.
Okay.
I think in Aunt Sue's house or Aunt Boo's house. And you were telling me about the story about somebody that had
Oh, yes.
nobody has suffered as much
that
like
was
that
a
story,
very
right? So
yeah.
it was very difficult, a very, very powerful constellation. And I thought that you and Mom had joined a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I'm like, okay, I'm an orphan now, right?
Yeah.
Because my dad was out of the picture at that point.
Yeah.
And then my sister and my mom, out of this craziness, had joined a cult. And that there was a person that was, kind of taking them over, right? In some capacity. I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Alberto.
Yeah.
What are they doing? Which
Yeah.
is insane. And I was kind of lost, right? Just
Yeah.
thinking, you guys are crazy. I'm never gonna do this. I'm not ready to deal with my shit. Let's just say it lightly. I'm not ready to deal with my shit. So I'm gonna kind of keep going on life without anything. So yeah, that's what you guys told me about it, right?
And then you joined us the following year.
And then the following year, Mom was like, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I was like,
Okay.
"No."
Oh.
And she's like, "Come on." And I'm like, "No." Like, I'll get you a trip to Romania. And I'm like, "Okay, fine."
And you were living in England at that time.
No, I was living in Louisiana. at the
Oh,
time.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
So you came all the way from Louisiana.
All the way from Louisiana
Romania.
to Romania. And I was in a bad place.
Yes, you were.
I was in a really bad place. Well, not in a bad place. I was in a place of, like, I was dating the wrong women. In difficult relationships.
Yeah. You were drinking a lot.
I was drinking a lot, right? I was still in the military. I was drinking a lot. And a little on a destructive path. I was working way too much. And then I said, okay, F it, let's go. So I went to Romania because I wanted to backpack through Spain.
That's right.
Or I wanted to do a backpack journey in Spain. So I did that
After. And you stayed in Alberto's house, in one of his houses.
Yeah.
Because you became friends with his
Because
sons.
I became friends with
who were
his
our
sons,
age at that time.
who are still our age.
Yeah.
Because time works that way.
Exactly.
So, okay, so are you going to continue asking me questions, or are we?
Yeah, so
are
what
we
did
off
you
that
think
track?
about the constellation when you first went there?
So
what
I
did you
was
think about
very
the
scared. So
workshop?
we were sitting there, and there was 55 Romanian psychologists and psychiatrists, and we can pause.
No, keep going. Keep going. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
So there was 55 Romanian psychologists, and I was like, these people are crazy. And then there was a weird lady that was sitting next to me that she was up to something.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
No.
So it was Alberto, his two sons, which are our age, right?
Yeah.
Miguel, the oldest, is my age, and then Juan, the youngest, is your age.
Yep.
And really nice guys, awesome people,
Yeah.
just amazing people,
Yes.
right? We got to know them. They're family friends. They came to my wedding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're really great people.
Yeah.
But they ended up, it was just you, me, and Mom sitting down, and then this kind of weird lady that was Spanish.
Okay.
You remember her?
No.
Anyways, so, and then 55 psychologists and
Yeah.
psychiatrists from Romania, and Romanian people, to be honest, are a little bit weird.
No, they're not.
Just a little bit.
No, they're wonderful.
They're wonderful people, but there's a tinge of weirdness.
No.
Just coming from an American, right, that was in Louisiana
Okay.
just a couple days before
Yes.
and didn't really know anything about Romanian culture.
Exactly. Or the trauma they went through.
Or the trauma that they went through.
Okay.
To me,
Yeah,
it was a
okay.
little off, right?
Okay.
It's just, a lot of beige colors and
Okay.
people looking the same. It was kind of odd. But anyways, so I got picked to represent somebody.
Oh, I remember this.
It wasn't the dog. It was, I think, the dog. I can't remember what it was.
No, wasn't it the person who had mental problems?
Yeah, that was way and later in the
so
week. Yeah,
hilarious.
so I was asked to represent somebody, and then it was game over after that.
Yes.
After I felt what it was like representing somebody.
So you had to represent, in one of the constellations, you had to represent somebody that had mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about that experience, because it was truly amazing to see you do that. So tell me a little bit about that.
So because because Alberto speaks Spanish and I speak Spanish, this was in Spanish that was happening. So I can't remember what her name was. Such a nice lady. The lady that was translating.
Ah, yeah. Was it Ramona? No.
No, it was something like that. But she was a very nice
Yeah.
lady. But so she didn't have to translate. So Alberto could speak to me directly in Spanish. So Alberto comes up to me, and I feel, for lack of a better word, out of myself. Representing this uncle, and I wanted to steal everybody's shoes.
Yes.
And I'm kind of losing my mind.
And you
he's
didn't
like-
know that.
And I didn't know that,
You were
right?
just representing
so
an
I was just
uncle.
representing, and I'm like, I want to take everybody's shoes. And so Alberto says, of course, he's crazy. So it was somebody that had mental illness,
Yes.
and that was not there present.
Yes.
So the person that was in the constellation was working through some of those things.
Exactly.
So that was kind of like one of the meta iterations. I represented a dog.
Yeah.
I represented many things, right?
Yes.
So that was my first experience. And then I did my constellation.
Was that the... Okay, tell me a little bit about your constellation.
So I was, so my first initial constellation was my relationship with my father.
Okay.
And Alberto asked me to pick somebody to represent Mom, somebody to represent you, and somebody to represent me, and then somebody to represent Dad.
Okay.
And you, me, and Mom were like in a triangle, like
Yes.
really close to each other.
Yep.
And then Dad was on the other side. And then Mom was like defending us from Dad, which like in this position of like guarding at all costs. And we were like super close to each other. And then I had to kind of see the trauma in Dad's past, and then, get some distance between you and I, which is appropriate.
Well, because we were in a triangle of survival, so that was the only
Yeah.
way we could survive
Yeah,
together. And it
exactly.
was time to...
Let that open up.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So Mom was sitting in front, so we all kind of, gave each other some space, which is we weren't in a survival mechanism anymore.
Which I would have liked to stay in that survival at that time.
Yes, exactly.
Because I wasn't ready.
Because you weren't ready, exactly. So we were kind of doing that, and then I was able to honor my father. And right after that, about 6 months after the constellation, I met my wife.
See? Wow.
And I've been happily married been with my wife for 13 years.
Wow.
And we've been married for 11 of those.
And you have two beautiful children.
Two beautiful children.
That we're watching play basketball right
Yes,
now.
exactly.
With my 3 children. Well, the smallest is sleeping.
Yeah, the smallest is sleeping, exactly. So that was my first kind of experience with constellation. And then since then, you have hosted constellations,
Yep.
trained, participated in many different versions of constellations because
Yep.
there's many different versions of constellations. There's shamanic constellations, there's traditional psychological constellations, there's structural constellations, there's systemic constellations, there's things that uncover systemic intelligence, there's workshops all over the world, right, that do these things, and then also trainings because you've been formally trained in constellations.
Exactly.
Right?
And right now I'm continuing my training with shamanic constellations.
Okay, all right. So with that in context, would you say how is constellations coming into the pop culture, or how are they coming into traditional culture? Do you say like Encanto, in the case of
Yeah.
Encanto, why did the constellation resonate so much about being in? Why does Encanto remind you of a constellation?
Because there was a traumatic experience that begun in the beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
and it's the grandfather being murdered
Yeah.
in front of the wife and the 3 children. And then you can see throughout the movie.
So what's really interesting is that the perpetrators are almost irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, completely.
So
irrelevant.
there's these 3 or 5 guys that come on a horse.
Yes.
And in a riverbed,
Yes.
they murder the grandfather.
Yes.
And he
And he's defending
sacrifices
his family.
himself.
Yes.
Like he sends out the kids, right? And
And
so
he's-
that's the miracle, is that the grandfather sacrifices himself for the mother and her 3
Well,
triplets.
Yes, not only for his family, but for the whole the whole group of
Yes.
people that were there.
So the whole village owe him
Yes.
a debt of gratitude, right?
Yes.
So that there's this situation where he sacrifices himself and he keeps the perpetrators at bay, and then the grandmother has this light that comes, like this miracle, this little light that comes out, right? And then what happens?
So throughout the course of the movie, you can see that the house starts to have cracks on the walls and cracks in the foundation. And Maribel
Okay.
is the only one that sees them in the beginning when it starts happening to the house. So she brings it to light, and the grandmother's like, "Oh, no, nothing's happening," like rejecting.
So the grandmother doesn't want to see the reality.
Doesn't wanna
Is that
see the
there's
reality.
foundational cracks
Yes.
in the family, right? The casita, which is
Yes, magical.
magical. It's a magical casita, right? And then it holds everybody together,
Yes,
and it's holding the miracle, or let's call it the lie, right?
Yes.
The facade of what this dynamic is.
yes,
And it starts having cracks in it.
yes.
Okay.
So, because Maribel didn't receive a gift, she starts to explore, and she starts getting signs from the house of what happened and why Bruno. So she starts asking questions. What's going on with Bruno? Why is his door off? Like, why? Where did he go? Why did he disappear? Why is he excluded? And like, she starts asking her aunt and her mom, what happened to Bruno? And then that's where the song, "We Don't Talk About Bruno."
Yeah.
So that's where it started. And she finds him, and he's in the house, but in the like underground or the.
So why is Bruno excluded?
So Bruno excluded.
happened?
So he was speaking the truth, and nobody
And he could
wanted
see
to
the future,
listen.
right?
And he
He
can
could
see the future, and nobody wanted to listen to that.
So he speaks the truth. He's the rebel in the system.
Exactly, he's the black
saying-
sheep
The black sheep.
of the family. So,
So-
normally,
The rebel in the system. For all the
Exactly.
rebels out there that are rebels in family systems that say what's on their mind, and
Yes.
that they can predict almost the future, and it's usually bad news.
and normally the black sheep of the family are the ones that are trying to heal the family.
Yeah.
So it's interesting
That are
they're
carrying
called-
the burden,
Exactly.
the burden of the family.
Exactly.
And Bruno.
Yeah. So, she starts to find out what's going on, and then she starts to talk about it with her family, and everybody little by little starts losing their magic.
Okay, so let's talk about the characters a little bit. Right?
Okay.
So, Luisa is the strong one,
And she starts to lose the power. That
but she's strong because she's carrying.
She's the
she has to
oldest.
be. She's the oldest, and she's carrying more than she's supposed to be carrying.
Exactly.
Right. She's the strongest physically.
Yes.
That can hold the responsibility of everybody, and then
Yes.
she does things for everybody at sacrifice of joy
Yes.
and just like peacefulness. She
Yes.
always has this inflated sense of responsibility.
And she feels like that she's worth what she can help everybody else
That the
with.
only way that she has
Yes.
worth is by helping other people.
Exactly.
Okay.
So when she starts losing her power, she
She
feels worthless.
Yeah. Because she's not in the position that she's supposed to be in the family system,
Exactly.
which we'll get to it eventually.
Yes.
All right. So tell me a little bit about Isabela.
So Isabela is perfect. Well, everybody thinks she's perfect. But
Okay.
inside, she was miserable. Like, she was going to marry a handsome boy from the village
Okay.
for the family. And she didn't want to, but she was doing it for her grandmother. She was doing it for the family.
So she's sacrificing her life in some capacity.
Yes.
To maintain a perfect image.
Yes.
Which is the image of the family system.
Yes.
That says, hey, look at how beautiful we produced this beautiful girl that's completely perfect.
Yes.
That can't be flawed or have her own failures or anything. And so she is... so she's carrying this burden for the family, and she has to keep up appearances, right?
Yeah.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Yes.
And
then you have Maribel.
And then
has
Maribel is
zero
like,
powers.
has zero powers. But she does have a black sheepness to her.
Yes.
And she's saying also what's wrong with the family. So
Exactly.
she's loyal to Bruno
Yes.
about being almost like an excluded one, but in a different way, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Dolores is the gossip, right? She can hear all the
Everything.
secrets,
Yep.
right? So she's gossipy, and
Yeah.
that's the real, if you want to come to information.
Yep. You just ask her.
You ask her, because she's the holder of information. Information is power. So she makes sure that she's not surprised by anything, right?
And everybody has a Dolores in their family. Like, everybody has every single one of these characters in their family.
Not everybody.
Bueno, pero the
it's
majority.
a common pattern.
Yes, it is a common
that
pattern.
happens in families, right?
Yes. That's why so many people can connect and can relate to this movie.
Of course, yeah. And so the aunt, right?
Yes.
The aunt has what's the
Power
aunt's
to-
name?
I don't remember.
Anyways, but
The power to control the weather.
which is, an aunt that has mood swings,
Yes.
right? In some capacity. It's like, has like, if she's in a bad mood, everybody's in a bad mood, right? If she's happy, everybody's happy, and has the power almost to change the weather of the family,
Yes.
or the
Yeah.
the temperament of the family
Yeah.
in some capacity. Okay.
And then you have Bruno, who has the power to see the future.
See the future, which is the black sheep.
Yep. And then you have Maribel's mom, who heals people through her food.
Okay. Okay. So,
And then Maribel has two cousins, one that speaks to animals, and then the other one who's able to impersonate anyone.
that is like a mirror.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, so people that have that personality.
Yeah.
That if they're around somebody, they become that person.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, that makes sense.
I think that's all the characters.
I think that's
that with the
major.
power.
And then the house.
Yes. And then
The house, in some capacity, is magical
yes.
because all these stories and all this magic happens inside the house.
So I feel like the house in a constellation is the field
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
that helps you. That helps the facilitator
Yeah.
show the truth.
Because the house is.
That's why the house cracked,
Yes, of course.
because it was showing the truth.
The house shows the truth, yeah. So okay, so now the stage is set. So what happens throughout the movie, and tell me a little bit about that.
So everybody starts to lose their powers because Maribel is trying to find out the truth about Bruno, what happened, why does she see that the house is cracking, and she finds out that she needs to heal her relationship with her sister Isabel.
Okay.
So she tries to do that, and she's like, Isabel, can you just give me a hug? And Isabel is like, you ruined everything. You ruined my engagement with, this handsome man from the village. And it turns out that she didn't want to marry this guy.
So the truth comes out.
The truth come out. And then through that, she's able to show that she doesn't have to always create roses. She can also create other exotic plants like cactuses
Prickly
and
things.
prickly things that are
Just has to be pretty. It can be
Exactly.
her creation can be
exactly
be all things.
yes, and they did that. Maribel and her did that together, and
Yeah.
that bonded their relationship. So
Healed the relationship.
healed, yes, thank you, healed the relationship, and the house still continued to crack.
So,
To
so
a
would you
point-
say that Maribel is a, sorry to interrupt, but I gotta put this thought out there. It's like, do you think that Maribel profoundly is a seeker of truth? Is that
Yes,
why she's
absolutely.
so curious and
Yes,
wants to
I
figure
think
out?
that's her gift.
Is that she's seeking the truth?
She's seeking the truth. She
Okay.
is healing the family's truth. Like she's healing the house's structure.
The house's foundation.
Yes, thank you. The house's foundation, exactly.
Okay.
So she heals her relationship with her sister, and
Yeah.
the house still is continuing to crack. It gets worse and worse. People are starting to lose their powers to a point that it crumbles down completely.
So the more the truth comes
It's
out,
out. The worse it
the
gets.
worse it gets.
So then she is speaking with her grandmother, and she's blaming her grandmother for all of this. So she's judging her.
So she's saying, "This is all your fault.
Yes, this is all your
This
fault.
is all your fault.
Yes,
If you wouldn't have been so demanding on the
Yes.
family
this would have
and
never
requested all these things that be perfect." And the grandma's just trying to keep the family together out of
Yes.
love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Maribel takes it and says, "This is your fault,
happened.
grandmother."
Yes. So she runs out to the river where her grandfather was murdered, and then everybody's looking for her.
Full circle.
Yes, for
Okay.
her full circle. And everybody's looking for her. And the grandmother finds her. And basically what they do is what you do in a constellation. So you speak to the person and you start
And the water's representing the field, right? It's almost
Yes,
like
exactly.
so she's standing in the water,
Yeah.
and the grandmother's standing in the water.
Yes, and they hold
they're,
hands.
They're holding hands, right? She's relieved that she found Maribel, right?
Yes.
And they're standing in the water. There's this moment of reunification.
And that's what you see in the constellation. So at the end of the constellation, you see exactly what they did, where the granddaughter tells the grandmother, "I see you. I honor you. Thank you for everything you did for our family. Thank you for keeping us together." And so we saw in a moment where she was judging her before, and then this, in the end of the movie, you see that she's honoring her.
So she's reconciling.
She's
She's
yes.
saying what happened, right? Which is, you sacrificed everything for this family. My grandfather was murdered. Your husband
Yes.
was murdered. You were left with these 3 children, and you're just trying to put your life back together with the best that you could with what you had, and that in honoring that and bringing that to light and not judging her grandmother, but taking her just as she is, with all her things, right? The good, the bad, and all the things. What happens?
Bruno appears. On
So
a
the
horse.
excluded
The
one
excluded
comes back.
And he starts defending his niece. And the first thing the grandma does, so Bruno's mom, is hug him,
It
embrace
says,
him.
"Thank you for coming back."
Thank you for coming back.
That's powerful.
It was truly beautiful. It was truly beautiful. So the 3 of them get on the horse and go back to the house. And then the village comes and they build the house together again.
So the community that because of this miracle and everybody that they helped through their gifts, right? Because Luisa is going out there picking up donkeys that got lost in the village, and Isabel would make everything beautiful, and they would bring the animals and the thing. So the whole community that benefited from all the benefits from these people are bringing back, giving the family, like, paying back their debt in some capacity.
So they all do it together, and then the front door doesn't have a doorknob. So they find a doorknob, give it to Maribel. Maribel puts it in the door, and then the door becomes magical.
The whole house becomes magical.
And then the whole house becomes magical, and everybody gets their power or their magic back.
But but there's a moment where she looks at the knob and she looks at her reflection,
Yes.
and that she, in finding her grandmother and reconciling with her grandmother, she can reconcile with herself,
Exactly.
and that she's the gift.
Exactly.
Just being her
Just being her.
as she is the gift.
So we're all able to relate with that because we are the gift.
That we're enough.
That we are enough. Just
Just
the way
we are. And that through trauma, we take on things that don't belong to us.
Exactly.
Out of loyalty to our family system.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be disease, divorces,
Addictions,
all the things that come in normal life. Mm-hmm. In one way or another are represented or are representations of our underlying loyalty to our family system.
Exactly. And we know of a tool that helps us stop that dynamic and stop that pattern from continuing on to our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids.
So the thought of in the Constellation is that even if the trauma is the most catastrophic trauma on the planet, that it can even be, I'll be the gatekeeper. So just to be the gatekeeper so that future generations don't have to go through
Exactly.
a similar dynamic.
Exactly.
Like the Holocaust.
Exactly.
Or slavery. Or fill in the blank with
Yes.
atrocity that has happened at mass scale.
That keeps happening.
Yeah.
We continue seeing it in the history.
And the dynamic of the victim and the perpetrator,
Mm-hmm.
right, is that in some capacity, the grandmother being a victim of the perpetrators right on the horses then became the perpetrator in the family system, and the family kind of in some capacity becoming victims.
Mm-hmm.
And that dynamic was tethered to each other, right?
Yep. No, and the fact that Disney created a movie that had to do with Constellation just shows you that as a community, we're healing together
Yeah.
through different practices. It doesn't have to be only family constellations. There's many things that you can do that can heal generational trauma, and the first thing is becoming aware of it.
Is acknowledging what is.
And I think a lot of people were able to connect with the characters in the movie because of that. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm Luisa. Like I saw a lot of videos on TikTok where, you know, the wife would record the husband watching Encanto with no kids, just the two of them, two adults watching Encanto, and being like, oh my gosh, I'm Luisa in this family.
Wow. Because the family patterns resonate.
Yeah, and CNN has an article saying how therapists are using the characters in this movie to help their clients.
Yeah.
It's truly remarkable. Like, I've watched the movie with my kids, I'm not exaggerating, about 25 to 30 times. And I'm also, I also teach Spanish in Chicago. I'm a high school teacher. And through, you know, our different units that we're using, that we study throughout the year, we're going to watch the movie Encanto and we're going to analyze the characters. Because we're studying
Wow.
about family, community, identity. So, you know, the fact that I can share this with my students is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And the fact that they kind of acknowledge this and illustrate it in such a beautiful way.
Such a beautiful way.
Like with the music and
I want to live in their house. Like, I was watching it and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to live there. The house doesn't have to be magical, but I want to live like the mountains and the food and the colors and the music. The music is phenomenal.
and from our perspective, it's almost represented our house was magical when we grew up.
Oh, absolutely.
And that their house had its own personality, right, in
Yes.
some capacity.
Yeah.
And it represented a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff. So it hit home, and we grew up in
Yeah.
Venezuela in a magical place.
In a magical
during a
place.
magical time.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
the family dynamics that had all the flavor and color and culture that one could expect growing up.
Yeah. No, you know, a lot of you have known what happened to Venezuela, and we haven't been able to go back. Like, I haven't gone
Yeah.
back to Venezuela for at least I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
And watching Encanto made me feel like I was going back to Venezuela
Yeah.
because I'm dying to go
Yeah, that makes sense.
and taking my kids there.
Yeah.
So through Encanto, I'd be like, yeah, we lived in a house similar to this. The mountains and the community and the music and,
Yeah.
you know, and the different color of skins. Like there was, one of the boys looks like my son Sebastian because he's brown with curly hair. You know,
Yeah.
the one that has the magic, that has the
Antonio,
power
yeah.
of the, Antonio.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I
So
feel
your
like,
children, just so people know, your children are biracial.
yes,
Your husband's Dominican.
yes.
And, your kids are a
Yeah.
product of your
Yeah,
marriage.
so I have a cappuccino, I have a caramel, a latte. So they're able to identify themselves with these characters as well.
Well, they're identified in movies, which traditionally didn't happen. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I highly
Yeah.
recommend this movie. And if you don't like it, it's okay. It's not your time.
It's not your time. You'll be ready sometime.
You will be ready
okay.
sometime, and we're available to answer any questions.
So tell people how to find you if they're interested in, getting in touch with you about doing constellations in Chicago.
Yeah, or in the Midwest.
Or in the Midwest,
Yep.
in the general Midwest area, if they're interested in doing constellations or learning more about this work. What's your Instagram?
So you can, I haven't created a Chicago Constellation Instagram yet. I should. But you can just write me at ChicagoFamilyConstellations@gmail.com.
So that's Chicago Family Constellations with an S
Yes.
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
Okay.
And you can just write me, and I organize about 2 constellations a year, and I bring a facilitator from Miami. He's originally from Peru, and he's phenomenal. And I'm hoping also to bring other facilitators that do other things.
And I've had Eric on the podcast.
You have, yes.
Yeah, Eric was on the podcast
Yes.
a couple.
And then
like
another
a year ago.
facilitator called named Sophia. She also wants to come
Sophie
to Chicago.
Sudai, yeah.
Sophie wants to come to Chicago. I also have a shaman, also from Peru, that does how do you call it? Ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies, shamanic ceremonies. So we have a lot going on. So if you are interested, please contact me. I'm more than happy to add you to this beautiful community that is growing. It's very exciting.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
You're welcome.